grocery haul. Of course, the cornbread, rice, squash, lard, cube steak, cabbage. That's some salt pork there, and of course, Adam's kitchen pepper. All right, first things first. So we want to season our cube steak, and we're going to season that cube steak with Adam's kitchen pepper. Now you can sprinkle this very liberally all over your cube steak or your meat or whatever you want to use. If you don't eat meat, that's fine. You can put it over your mushrooms. I'm sure this would taste great on mushrooms as well. Now you see I was not stingy with the kitchen pepper. I never am. Because you want your food to be seasoned well. The kitchen pepper is salt free. So I'm going to add just a little bit of salt to it here in just a second. You season both sides. Why? Because you have two sides of the meat. So this is tough. I'm trying to cook with one hand. So there we go. So the other side gets Adam's kitchen pepper. And then just a little bit of salt. All right, we're just gonna let that sit while we get everything else done. We have some chopping to do now. While the cube steak is marinating in its seasoning, I'm gonna chop up some cabbage and some squash. Also going to slice up some onions to be able to complete tonight's meal. And we're just going to speed up the chopping process because everyone knows how to chop. The only thing that I want to tell you is just be very, very careful. Use a sharp knife and keep your fingers out of the way whenever you're cutting. All right, so now in my pan I have some salt pork, and like I said, about a half tablespoon of olive oil, because we're going to fry this cabbage. I'm going to leave that salt pork in there and just drop the cabbage. Be very careful because I've rinsed the cabbage, and you want to be very careful to put it in there quickly. Oil and water do not mix. Hot oil and water is very dangerous. We have the hot pan there with the olive oil and salt pork there. And we're going to just lay the squash over in there, season it very liberally with some fresh black pepper and sprinkle some salt in. Now, as you see here, I'm putting quite a bit of squash in there, but we want to season by the layer. So you'll probably see me throw a little bit of salt in there and some pepper later. But you want to layer your seasonings, especially if you have quite a bit of things, so that you don't have to do too much stirring. Every layer is seasoned. that big white blob in that pan. It is called white gold. It is called flavor. It is called the essence of life. It is also known as lard. I used about a cup of lard to fry this dish. It's melting there, and it's going to be delicious. Hey, remember me? Here are the cube steaks. They've been seasoned, they've been waiting, and then we have about a cup of flour here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to season the flour as well. I'm going to season it liberally with, what are you seasoning it with, Don? Adam's kitchen pepper. It's a robust blend of more than 9 different spices. They are so good, and none of them outpower the other. They all work together in unity and love. So we're going to do that. Mix it up there. Now again, there is no salt in this mix, so I need to add just a smidget of salt after I get it put in the pan here. We're going to just coat the cube steaks, and then we're going to cover it, and we're going to shake, rattle, and roll. Take your lid off, and you have coated cube steak. Now, if it doesn't get in all the crevices, that's okay. You can just add it in there because you want it to be breaded very well. Now, the leftover flour that you see that's in this pan, in this bowl here, we're going to use that to make the gravy. So, next up, frying. All right, so that cabbage is going, y'all. It's looking really good. Let me see if I can give you a sneak peek at it. Look at it. It's looking good. It's pretty much done. I'm going to cook it down a little bit more. And whoever was minding my business, saying that my pan was too crowded, you were right. I had to move the squash over. But see, it's going. I got it covered. It's cooking down and steaming, and my grease is ready. Now, cube steak is not the best cut of meat. It's typically a really tough cut of meat. So that's why you see it fried a lot of times, and a lot of times it's stewed down in a gravy, because it helps to break it up, break up those muscles. That's one piece. And you don't want your pan screeching hot, because if it is, it's going to burn your stuff. Just take your time. You don't have to be in a hurry. And if you are, tell them to get a sandwich. All right, so while the cube steak is going, we want to get the rice on. So what we have here is about a cup of rice, and what we want to do is toast it. We don't want to rinse it. We're going to just pour it over into the pot there, over medium high heat, and just stir it continuously. We don't want to brown the rice. We just want to get it to where it becomes opaque, where it really turns white. No color on it. If you get it browned or you toast it, then it changes the flavor of it. It gives it a little bit more of a nutty flavor. So we just toast this until the color becomes opaque, like you can kind of see some of the kernels there. in the pot goes a cup and a half of water. The rule usually is 2 parts water to 1 part rice, but I use 1.5 cups of water. After adding the rice to the pot, I stir it for a little bit and wait for it to boil. And whenever it boils, I will put the lid on it and take it off the heat. Water's boiling. One quick stir, making sure nothing's on the bottom. Lid on, turn it off. Once your cube steaks get done, you want to remove them from the pan and let them drain and rest a bit to move on to the next phase. Now what you will see is some brown bits. That's for your gravy. Back to our gravy. So I poured the oil off. We're going to throw those onions in, and we're going to saute those onions just until they're translucent. Once the onions begin to get translucent, we're going to then put some flour in the pan, and we're going to work our roux. Now this took about 20 minutes to make, the roux did, to get that good gravy, because I believe in a slow roux. I don't believe in rushing it, because if you do, you will mess up. Now that's gravy. I'm going to add a little bit more water to it to kind of thin it out just a little bit more, because it's going to go in the oven for about 10 to 15 minutes. And so as it cooks at a high temperature, it will continue to thicken up, and as it sits, it will continue to thicken up. So no worries. If you make it too thin, you can even thicken it back up with just a little bit of water and some flour and make you a little thickener, just in case you accidentally mess up. But if you take your time, you won't mess up on gravy. It's easy. Once the gravy got to the consistency that I wanted it, I placed the cube steaks back in, and very carefully, because you see that's boiling. So I placed them back in and added some onions to it, covered it, and let it cook on top of the stove for about 3 or 4 minutes while the oven was continuing to preheat. And then I put it in the oven and allowed it to cook again for another 10 to 15 minutes or so until it's extremely tender. And you will see very soon how tender it is when Grandma tastes it. There you have it, finished product. Smothered cube steak, rice and gravy, fried cabbage, stewed squash, and cornbread. Let's see what Grandma thinks.
Delicious.
She ready to eat. No knife. Did you see that? Did you see how easy she cut that cube steak?
Yep, went right through it. You like a knife.
It's so tender when you put that cube steak in the oven and let it just bake slowly. It's good. So I think we get the nod of approval, huh, Grandma?
The nod of approval.